Hello, Mr. Kenny, are you there?
Oh, I actually lost you for a few minutes. I didn't
I'm so
realize
sorry.
you called me up to the platform.
Oh, yes, I
Okay,
have. Okay.
so I can go ahead and make my presentation. Am I
Oh,
correct?
yes, you can. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. The floor is open.
Oh, thank you. Yes, thank you very much. And thanks. I appreciate that you could give me the support from behind at that end, flipping through my presentation. So, good morning, everyone. Um, I'm very delighted that I have the privilege to share this platform with us, and which I consider actually to be a learning space. Being a learning space, personally, I'm open to learn from this webinar as well, while I share a little bit from the perspectives that I have from a personal perspective and that of based on activities of Solidaridad so far. So I'll be speaking briefly to supporting farmers to achieve deforestation-free crops. Please, could you go to the next slide, please? The outline of my presentation is that I'll be introducing the EUDR, just a very brief introduction to it. Then I will talk about stakeholders' response. And then I will share a little bit about Solidaridad's response plan and action. And then I would also share a few case studies with us during my presentation. Thank you. Next, please. Okay, so in general, I do believe, or I guess, that we all have heard about the EUDR. What probably it aims at is what some may not have understood. So the aim of the EUDR in general is to combat global deforestation and forest degradation driven by EU consumption. So the global forest landscape has become a concern to stakeholders. And so from the EU point of view, countries in the EU have designed part of their contribution towards slowing down or stemming deforestation using the EUD regulation. Now, why is this an issue and what are the requirements? The regulation seeks actually to reduce the EU's environmental footprint and promote sustainable land use practices globally. So other continents or people, countries who are yet to do the same they can do to promote sustainable land use and practices globally. Now, that regulation requires that companies would ensure that products sold in the EU, including soy, oil palm, beef, cocoa, coffee, and rubber, particularly, are deforestation-free and legally produced. And what this means is that these seem to be the key commodities that are in the EU, which the EU believes within the context of its own markets that these commodities, directly or indirectly, are responsible for the triggering of deforestation in any landscape globally. And so they have brought up this regulation and the policy to drive this. I lost connectivity for a bit, but can you hear me, please? Yes. So, who is affected by the EUDR? The EUDR actually has singled out three categories of persons, or two categories of entities that they are concerned about. They define those who are affected or obligated by the EUDR as operators and as traders. So examples of the traders, they say that the traders will be responsible for storing and sharing information on their supply chain to operators. While the operators are, e.g., companies that will be required to implement the due diligence on their supply chains and just to be sure that they comply with the EUDR. But next please, what is critical is that there is a stakeholder that is missing. And so the question we ask is, are smallholder farmers, do they matter actually in the EUDR? Because it appears as if farmers, or the mention of farmers, that there is silence about them. Not totally. It's not that they are silent about them, but they believe that companies or governments or other entities that are involved, either at the operators level or the traders level, would ensure that the sourcing of their products, which comes from farmers, would also causing this. Because of that silence, it would appear as if certain stakeholders would not in any way want to think that smallholder farmers should have any support or should have any capacity enhancement to enable them meet up with those demands of the EUDR. So we say that smallholder farmers are key, and that they produce, because they are the ones that produce material share of the global production in many of the agricultural commodities that have been mentioned. And so capacity for them needs to be scaled up so that they can be able to access the new sustainable markets we're talking about. Next, please. Now, speaking about stakeholders' response, therefore, and a call to action. We say that all these companies that are mentioned, evidence of compliance. They also say that producers also must become more aware of sustainable practices and the measures towards obtaining relevant compliance. So these entities, the question now is, all the entities, either as companies or as producers, to what extent are they aware of the provisions and demands of the EUDR? That's one key question that needs to be answered. Some might argue that yes, they are aware, they are global supply chains. So they have sustainability managers, they have sustainability components in their markets or in their corporate provisions. However, the question that arises from that is to what extent and in which or what landscapes are these companies and producers able to ensure or demonstrate that they provisions aware? Then there is the third stakeholder component, which is the public institutions. So question is, the public institutions, and are they aware, to be sure that as duty bearers, they must be able to activate the appropriate policy responses that align with their local context and ensures that companies and producers are not market displaced. So bringing it back, we'll talk about West Africa, we'll talk about Africa in general. To what extent are these entities, to what extent our public institutions and duty bearers made efforts to ensure that entities who are supposed to be part of these entire processes of the EUDR, that they are compliant and that the policy environment is provided for them to operate so that they are not market displaced. Next, please. Next, please. And so here is what Solidaridad's response in this regard has been. We therefore are saying that for us to be able to respond to this, we look at 4 key steps for intervention. So we're saying that stakeholders, engagement and awareness is critical. How? 1, Solidaridad has endeavored to engage with stakeholders, including farmers, companies, and governments, to raise awareness about the EUDR requirements and implications. If there's a way to probably, I'm speaking to the organizers, there are certain comments that are coming in that can be very destructive. If you can, from your back end, remove such participants from the space so that we have less distraction, please. Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. So sorry about that. I'm working on that. So sorry.
Okay, so we are engaging with stakeholders, including farmers, companies, and governments, to raise awareness about the EUDR requirements and its implications. And the intention is that we want to ensure that all parties understand their roles and responsibilities under the regulation. Next, please. Next, please. So, to be able to achieve that, we also do capacity building and technical support to the extent that we are able to get the resources. We provide capacity building initiatives and some support to help producers and companies who want to comply with the EUDR standards. Some have approached us in the cocoa supply chain particularly, and a few others are also knocking at our doors. The kind of things we do is to offer them guidance on sustainable practices, traceability systems, and how they can be more compliant to ensure that their supply chains are deforestation-free. Next, please. Next, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. All right. So speaking to the case studies, a few of the things that we are doing. One of them is that we build the capacities of our stakeholders, those who we work with, on best management practices, on traceability and ethical sourcing. We are also we have followed up commodity-focused entities and brought them together with other stakeholders on a platform referred to as the MSP. So we have this in the oil palm value chain in the different states where we work. We also have them at the cocoa supply chain level as well. The third case study, which I just need to, because of our time, I've just made this very brief, is that we ensure through policy advocacy that we activate appropriate consultations and policy dialogues that are required. Next, please. Yes, and then we match these up with appropriate awareness and sensitization, especially multi-sectoral stakeholder forums at national and state levels, and then also follow. Yeah, next please. And I think that is the end of my presentation. I think over to you, Chioma and Ifoma. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Kenneth, for such a wonderful presentation. And I'm really sorry that all these messages had to come up. I'm so sorry for that distraction. Well, for ongoing, we'll make sure everything is private from now on. And when we open the messages, people can drop messages. I know that was a big distraction for you, and we are really sorry about that. So sorry. Okay. So please, does anybody have any question before we go over to the next speaker? The floor is open for Mr. Kenneth to, ask his question. Does anybody have any question? Or can we go over to the next speaker? You can actually unmute yourself or drop a message so that Mr. Kenneth can take your questions before we go to the next speaker. So I'll just give us 1 minute, and if no one is ready to ask question, Mr. Hamid can have the floor. Does anybody have any question? Okay. Okay. So if you have questions, please you can ask them at the end of Mr. Hamid's presentation. Okay. So not wasting so much of our time, Mr. Hamid, you have the floor. You can go ahead. Thank you. Hello, Mr. Hamid. Are you there?
Okay, thank you. I think because I could not unmute myself from here. Hello, everyone.
Hello, we can hear you.
Okay, good morning. My name is Paul Hamid.
We can't hear you anymore.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. So why I'll focus on the oil palm. Okay, please. Next slide. Just a few background to know about our organizations, WIMA. Wilmar Nigeria International has two subsidiary under BIC Plantations and Hayop Industry. I'll not bore us with that. It will interest that apart from our nuclear estates, we also have about 72 outgrowers farmers, which we work with. And then all our operations with the outgrowers farmers are channeled towards EU deforestation regulations. Next slide, please. Okay. Mr. Kenny has talked more elaborate on the EU deforestation-free regulations. So I'll just highlight some few points and the focus. We're all aware about the EU regulations, which aims at preventing deforestation linked to agricultural commodities such as cocoa, oil palm, and our focus on this webinar will be on oil palm commodity. And our aim is to ensure sustainable productions and protections of our global forest, which is fast growing into extinction. As we all know, oil palm is one of the commodity that is reported as one of the major drivers of this deforestations through land clearing uh, for cultivations of oil palm. And then our call to see the need, how we can support our local farmers, because the EU has different regulations and uh, procedures, and majority of all these farmers are not aware of all these steps, which as organizations we have to support them. How can we support them? One of the key aspects to support the local farmers is through hard grower scheme, which Wilmar International has incorporated into their operations. Next slide, please. Just a small brief about smallholders in Nigeria. Please, next slide. Okay. Talking about oil palm commodity is a well-known crops, which we know that all farmers, just like cocoa, soya, a lot of local farmers has their own local experience how to cultivate it. And because of the demand for oil palm, there's a lot of massive local demand for oil palm because it's one of the essential importance for our local dialect. There's no a lot of essential things that we make use in our dialect cooking. We have to make use of oil palm, which make it very important in our daily dialect. Nigeria is also as part of being considered as one of the producer of oil palm in the world, but the categorization up to like 5 in the world, uh, ranging from Malaysia, Indonesia, and with the demand of oil palm in Nigeria, we're able to, the local productions were able to make less half of our local demand for this oil palm production. And that is why Wilmar, for instance, uh, encourage hard growers. I will share some case study in our effort, which about maybe our efforts to support the hard grower scheme in order to encourage them and to perform their operations in line with EU regulations. Next slide, please. Okay. Some of our strategies to support farmers. You understand, to achieve EU-free deforestation, there is a lot of activities that you have to carry out, like what Mr. Kenneth said. Due diligence is one of it, and then if farmers does not have the financial support, how can they carry out some of all this due diligence in order to check maybe the area that they want to cultivate oil palm is a forest zone, or is an area that is prone to is within the protected area. So supporting farmers through financial incentive support is one of the key strategies to help farmers in line with EU deforestation free. Also, access to credit. A lot of to do land preparations for oil palm is a capital intensive project. Then, if farmers have good access to credit facilities, low interest loan for this sustainable farming is one of the big uh, incentive or big stride that you can do for a local farmers. Also, education and training. Although I'll still be talking more on how this collaborative effort, like capacity building, which Mr. Kenneth from Solidaridad has talked about. When you build the capacity of the local farmers, you make them to understand the requirements of free deforestation to the farming, and then you imbibe with them. You can also share your knowledge of best practices and innovations when it comes to sustainable oil palm. These are one of the strategies that we can use to support farmer to achieve this goal. Next slide, please. Okay, just sharing some of our experience on how we have engaged some local farmers in achieving these strategies. First, in terms of planting crops, can you make it more visible for me? Okay, planting stocks. For farmers, because of the land scarcity, farmers actually need high yield of planting stocks, which they can utilize within the limited space that they have, because this can also discourage them from opening more forest area, which is one of the strategies that we can use to get farmers. So, like I made mention of, also access to financing, affordable capital for farmers on low interest loan, which they can use to get some farm inputs, fertilizer in order to boost their productivities. Also, farm management expertise, carrying out a kind of extension work to support the farmers on good agricultural practices. You supply them some required farm inputs, which they can use to boost their productions and yield, and also sharing knowledge, because a lot of organizations, big farms already have some expertise which they can share their knowledge and train the farmers on a sustainable uh, farm practices. Also, uh, for them, effective recovery and repayment of their loan, because you gave them access to credit facilities. You should also have a kind of a management plan which they can repay this loan, so that should in case they need more loans, they will have access to it. And also creating a market, because if you have your fruit and then you don't have access to market, so that could also be a kind of a challenging factors for the farmers. But when you create a kind of a market value for them, which they have a direct access, they can bring their fruits to the main, and then in returns they get value for their investment. Please, next slide. Okay. Yeah. In all this process, of course, there's some could be some challenges which some of all these local farmers can face. First, in terms of economic pressures, we know the price of CPO now is unstable, even with the exchange rate. Maybe from your first advert, you are selling your FFB at some particular price. Within the same affected period, price could change. So, and also maybe your input fertilizer. So this economic pressure and high cost of some other things can also cost a challenges for farmers to achieve this EU um, regulations. Also, to invest in a sustainable practice. For instance, if you have to develop your farm in accordance to like RSPO, that's Rustable and Sustainable Palm Oil. If you want to follow new planting procedures, like I said, it requires a lot of huge capital. You have to do HCV assessment to ascertain that where you are developing have some high conservation values. You don't have some potential forests that can retain carbon. You have to ensure that you are not deforesting some areas. To go into those assessments takes huge cost, which as a local farmers, they might not be able to afford that. But as some other stakeholders, organizations, which can come in and then assist the local farmers in order to offset some of all these costs, in order to achieve uh, uh, the huge fluctuations, price volatility of palm oil is sometimes not stable, which can also cause a kind of discouragement for the farmers. Also, lack of knowledge and resources. When the farmers are not aware of some specific knowledge or maybe what they are supposed to do, maybe they are not aware of the right sustainable agricultural practices. Generally, majority of the farmers, they are aware of this slash and burn, and which they are not aware of some negative impact of this practice. So you have to train them and retrain them, build their capacity, partnering with them, and thank God for agencies like Solidaridad, which they are really doing a lot of big assistance in that, in majority of all these commodities, to support farmer in terms of knowledge and training needs. Also, resource limitations. Some of these farmers don't have this technology know-how and input about sustainable farming, and to also achieve how they can improve and what their productivity yield. So this kind of resource limitation is also a kind of a factors which farmers encounter. Another important thing is land scarcity and availability. With a little space of farms that the farmers have access to, because maybe their productions they cannot meet up with what they have because of the heat. So they tend to look elsewhere, like go into some protected area in order to cultivate their farm. Please, next slide. Okay. No, please go back. Yes. Some future directions that we are looking at. First, technology advancement. Now, as we are now, in every sector, both agriculture and every sector, oil palm, precision agriculture techniques is what majority of people are using. So we have to like engage the farmers and have this knowledge about precision agriculture by using right data, technology, and also to optimize their farming practice. But by introducing this to the farmers, it will help them to monitor their yield, to understand their productivities level, which in returns we boost their income, and then also reduce a kind of a pressure for them to look for more land to deforest. Also, genetic research is also a very good way that we can look into giving the farmers availability of high yield planting materials, and also materials seedlings that are disease resilient, and also giving them a good varieties of seedlings that they can utilize their productivity within the little land that are being available. Also, community engagement is also a very key aspect that we can use by engaging the local communities, involving them in the different decision making, like this EU. So it's not just about imposing some regulations on them. You have to make them to understand the reason why they have to follow some of all these sustainable practice. You also have to engage them, involve them in the process, and let them have this ownership to know. In some areas where you see if the way the communities are being involved in protecting forests. In fact, if you compare the area being managed by the communities and the one that is being managed by the state, you'll see a kind of a significant difference in the aspect that the community are managing, because they own this forest. They see the need for them to protect it for their own needs and future generation. So community engagement is really a key thing that we can look in terms of supporting the farmers to achieve these EU regulations. Another thing, sustainable livelihood. If you create a kind of alternative source of livelihood for them to reduce their dependence on forest resources, this we also enhance the aspect of deforestation free crops. Next slide, please. Yeah, in conclusion, I think if we are looking at how we can support the farmers to achieve this EU free deforestation free crops, we need to look at some strategies on how to support the farmers, like I mentioned in my presentations. Financial support, give farmers access to credit facilities, trainings, you educate them, you engage the communities, and also train them on different sustainable practices, and also for you to get this record of to demonstrate that the local farmers are doing the right thing. You also need to put them into under certification scheme, like the smallholders, like RSPO, HSPO, ISO. You can demonstrate when you take their process through this certification, and then they can demonstrate by having that certificate, even for they are within their supply chain, can show that yes, they have passed through this kind of level practices, good agricultural practices, and then they have obtained a kind of a certification. So this is also a kind of a key, and where big organizations like SOACEL also can also support the farmers in order to achieve this. Also, policy support in terms of see how best they can implement these EU deforestations. You see some policies that could affect the farmers, and how you can help them in order you will not bring a kind of rigid policy which you know that the farmers cannot achieve. And how can we address it? Call to actions for everyone, every participant, every stakeholders that we listen to this is our we should ensure a kind of a collective effort and encourage different stakeholders and to collaborate to achieve this sustainable palm oil production through different means, from social NGOs, environmental NGOs, developmental institutions. If we collaborate together and come up with a kind of modality and action plan to support the local farmers, like this webinar, which I know it entails like educating the local farmers, building our capacities of the stakeholders is a key action point that we can use to achieve this free deforestation free for the local farmers. Next slide. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Hamid. Thank you very much. That was really, really educative. I'm sure we all have one or two questions to ask our guest in the house from Mr. Kene, who is the programs manager at Solidaridad, to Mr. Hamid. So if we have questions, we can raise our hands or we can drop this messages. Yes, okay. But okay, yes, we have Sydney. Yes, Mr. Sydney, the floor is open. You can go ahead with your question.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you very much for the presentation. It was really enlightening. I have a question, something like a scenario. I want you to help me walk through. Now, let's say I inherited, land from maybe my grandfather or something, and I'm interested in practicing cultivating oil palm plantation. Yeah, the land in question now is almost turned into a forest. How do I go about it so that I can fall within the EU regulations? Right, it's not something that based on what you said now, is not the EU is frowning at deforestation. So how do I go about achieving my dream of cultivating an oil palm plantation while staying in line with the EU regulations? How do I go about it?
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Sydney. So who is this question for? Is it for Mr. Paul or Mr. Kenneth? Mr. Sydney, who are you? Who is this question for?
Okay, maybe I can answer that. I'm sure
Okay, go
it's direct. Okay,
ahead.
thank you for the question. On this aspect, you see, like maybe from our social story, land is one of the major thing before you can cultivate oil palm. And to ensure this, that's why we encourage our farmers, for instance, as a local farmers, to develop their oil palm from according to there's a scheme called RSPO, Rentable and Sustainable Palm Oil. It's actually a voluntary scheme which has already highlighted some of all these key points how you can do. First, you have to look at the area, the land, the legality of the land. For instance, is a kind of a family land, and among the families, you are not the only one. First, you have to follow through like free plan and informed consent. It could be within your family members. You have to make them to understand that first, this land that you want to use for oil palm could be for your home benefits, for the family benefits. Legality of the land. You could find a way depending on your family, uh, your 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 family modality. Perhaps maybe you have to buy the land at outright purchase, or maybe you have a sum of agreement within your family circle. In fact, it could also be like you are getting the land from the community. So you have to have a kind of a documented evidence that prove that this land is not taken by force. That's number one thing, because there have been a lot of cases that some people, maybe because they're allied in the community or maybe in the family, want to impose their own interest on other people. So you have to ensure that first, the legality of the land, you have the rights to use the land, perhaps by form of engagement, outright rights. So that's number one thing. Because also, if you want to like be, for instance, if you want to like join our outgrower scheme, those are one of the things that we have to ensure. First, the legality of the land. We also have to register, and we have to ensure that this land is not being a form of land grabbing. And then, depending on the size, we require some certain things that you have to do. If you want to cultivate on land that is more than 500 hectares, for instance, there's some certain procedures that you have to carry out under new planting procedure. Like you have to do environmental impact assessment, you have to conduct HCV assessment, you have to conduct social impact assessment, you have to do soil sampling, a lot of things. So those are some certain things. But for with the area that is not up to that extent, but you still have to like do a kind of a social impact assessment within the cycle of perhaps maybe the communities that you have that land. So depending on the scope or the landscape, we determine the kind of assessment. But basically, uh, those are the things like I may mention land legality on the land ownership is very, very important before you can proceed into this, because so that it will not bring a kind of issues at the end after maybe you have developed your plantations. So I don't know if I was able to like answer to you to satisfy your question.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I just wanted to point out that, like if I inherited the land. That's what I'm saying. Like I inherited it. It's mine, right? But it's a forest land. The question now is, what steps do I follow so that I won't contravene the EU laws with respect to the deforestation aspect? Because if it's a forest land and I want to cultivate oil palm, the next thing I'm thinking about is to deforestate. That's the first thing I'm thinking about. So how do I go about it? Is it that I need to maybe cultivate a portion of it, or how do I go about it to ensure that I am not found wanting?
Okay, first, I think from my whole understanding, I'm not sure you can reach forest land, because all forest land belongs to the state. If you are being given a kind of a portion of the forest land, a degraded forest land, for instance, you have to follow the protocol according to each state. In some states, they encourage you can apply to the forestry department, maybe like in Cross River State, for the reservations of that area. Without that the reservations process, you cannot cultivate oil palm within that area, because it's classified as a protected area. So, but for area which is not under forest area, yes, you can follow like those procedures that are also being mentioned of. But for an area that is classified as a forest reserve, you cannot cultivate oil palm without following deforestation procedure. So you have to first classify that area as non-forest area. Otherwise, if that area is being classified as a forest area, you cannot develop oil palm within that area, because that's also one of the aspects that the EU law is looking at. A lot of people, there's a lot of forest estates which find, according to gazetted publications, they're still under forest estate. But even though maybe they are all deforested area, but you cannot still cultivate oil palm without deforestation, the reservations of that area. That's the word, the reservations of that area. So that's it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hamid. Thank you for that explanation. Thank you for answering that question. I hope Mr. Sidney, he was able to answer your question. Hello, Mr. Sidney. Are you there?
Yes.
Hello, Mr. Sidney.
Yeah.
The question, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so
Where he said, go ahead. I think Mr. Kenechukwu.
okay. From the chat, someone asked a question. His name is Samuel Ogeze. He said, does Wilmar and Solidaridad work with other value chains aside palm oil? Okay, so we have someone who wants to know if, apart from palm oil, is there any other commodity you work with? Mr. Kenne, can you answer this question? Are you there, Mr. Kenne?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, I am here. Let me just, before I answer that, add to what my colleague, Mr. Hamid, had shared. Just a brief one for Sydney. Depending on the location of your oil palm, depending on where the farm is, if it shares proximity or it is within a forest enclave, the best route you probably have to follow is to get in touch with experts who already are having one thing or the other to do with the RSPO. That would be the shortest, that would be the fastest way for you to be able to get the advice that will guide you, because such experts who understand the RSPO provisions will be able to assess your farm, its location, and the forested landscape proximate to it or in which your farm is an enclave. And then they will be able to advise you on what to do. I think that's just a very simple way to go.
Yes.
About the other commodities, yes. Wilmar, I think I'll leave Wilmar to be able to mention the commodities they are working in. I know they do oil palm. Probably there are others which I'm not aware about. But Solidaridad focuses on sustainable supply chains. So we work across several. At the moment, we are handling more than 10 supply chains globally. And within Nigeria, we are working in 6 supply chains as at now. So you talk about oil palm, you talk about cocoa. We're also in the fruits and vegetables sector. And then we are working with stakeholders in the potatoes supply chain. We had also worked in leather, and that has to do with livestock some time ago, and we're still very much open to that. So quite a couple of things that we do around, including maize, rice, and all that. So whatever is your interest, you can approach us and then we'll talk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Kenneth. Thank you for that. Mr. Ogezi, I hope that answered your question. Okay, then for Wilmar, is there any other supply chain you're working on aside palm oil?
No, our focus is only on oil palm.
Okay, oil palm. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for that, Mr. Samuel Ogezi. I hope that concludes your question. I hope we've our experts in the house have answered your question. Then I have Mr. Mohammed Jibril. Yes, your hand is raised. You can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. Hello, Mr. Mohammed Jibril. Are you there? Okay, we have Mr. Emmanuel. Mr. Emmanuel Akinwale. You can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello. This is
Okay,
Mr.
go ahead, Mr. Mohammed. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. We are talking about how to support the smaller scale farmers in doing their activities. So one of the challenges our small scale farmers are facing now is that eczema problems. I don't know. I want to ask, I don't know, how does the individual as a person do, or government or NGO do? What we do to reduce the problem of this eczema for the smaller scale farmer? That is my question.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Mohammed Jibril. So your question is, how do we provide security regarding the headsmen? Yes. Okay.
Yes,
I don't know if any of our experts can answer that question, although we can have another session where we'll call on maybe our security experts to take us through on how we can protect ourselves, our farmland, and the smallholder farmers. But right now, what we are talking about is supporting farmers to achieve deforestation. Yes, but if our experts in the house can answer, then that's fine. Although we'll make provision for inviting a security officer regarding that. Hello, Mr. Jibril. Did you get the? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. I'm so sorry, but this
No problem.
we'll organize another webinar for that. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Emmanuel Akinwale, are you there? Can you go ahead with your question? Hello, Mr. Emmanuel. Okay, while we're still waiting for Mr. Emmanuel to go ahead with his question, I just want to add, yes, OASL also have been able to partner with Solidaridad, and we have our commodity marketplace where is an open market where buyers and merchants are able to trade their commodity. So we are also helping with this, which is leading to transparency in prices. We have our crop center in Cross River. We have our crop center in Akwa Ibom. So all of this is, to get closer to the smallholder farmers so that, they can come, bring their commodities, we train them, and we offer them fertilizer, agrochemical, and the rest. So this is the little ways OASL, has been able to, help with this from our own end, alongside with Wilmar, Solidaridad. So thank you. Yes, I just wanted to, put this for every other person to, to hear that also. Okay, so Mr. Manuel, are you there? Are you there, Mr. Manuel?
I'm there.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm there. Yes. Yeah. Almost answer my questions. Uh,
Hello, I didn't get that, Mr. Manuel. I didn't get that, Mr. Manuel. Oh, yes, I think so. Mr. Manuel, can you unmute yourself? Because if you're speaking, you are muted. So you need to unmute so we can hear you. Okay, Mr. Manuel, you can reach us at marketplace@zoacell.com with your question, and then we can direct it to our experts in the house. We can't hear you right now, and it's past 12 o'clock. So this webinar is supposed to be an hour, and I'm sure every one of us have other things to do. So thank you very much, Mr.